Hi there, Hal again. Today I'm going into my D&D Roguelike game again, this time with more depth into the coding aspects of it. I've previously done like a general overview and um, a like planning aspects dive or deep dive, but now we're doing the actual coding systems of the game, so if you haven't seen those, go watch those. And then, yeah, this will be the coding one. So I've got a few things I want to show you. First is this just a simple state machine for enemy AI. So it has the like entry that just doesn't do anything. It just goes straight into the sleep state. And then we also have stand, patrol, chase, and sleep can go into either stand or patrol. And then patrol can go back to stand or to chase. Stand can go to chase or patrol, as you can see indicated by the arrows there. I also had the attack, reposition, run away, but I never got to use those because I had just had simple spider enemies and I didn't implement a kind of attacking system. It was just an attacking, it was just dealing damage to the player based on collisions with them. So we only got to use these four in my project at the time, but we also have booleans here on the side that will be important. So we've got is asleep, is patrolling, is idle, and can see enemy. So you can see here that it will go from the sleep state to the stand state if is idle is true and is asleep is false, and it will go back if is asleep is true. It will go from stand to patrol if is patrolling is true, and back to if it stand if is patrolling is false. It will go to chase if can see enemy is true, and it will go back to patrol if can see enemy is false and is patrolling is true, and then it will do go back to stand if can see enemy is false but if patrolling is not true, and then if it can see enemy from standing it will go to there as well. And I can show you the scripts for these. So firstly, with the sleep behavior, so first of all we just want to check that the um, the the state machine gets all of the relevant um, prerequisite code systems that it needs. So it needs a sprite renderer for the enemy and the pathfinding system for the enemy. And this is just when we enter the state, as you can see up here. So it makes sure that we have the sprite renderer and the pathfinder. As you can see here, get sprite renderer. If there isn't a sprite renderer, or if it's null, then it will get the sprite renderer. Otherwise, it will return the current sprite renderer that it already has, and if for some reason it can't get the sprite renderer, it will just return out of this script and won't even run the state machine at all. And then it does the same thing for the pathfinding system there. And then it'll set is idle to true, and it will say that it will disable the sprite renderer and the pathfinder. So when it's in the sleep state, it doesn't do anything, doesn't even appear on the screen. It will just sleep, and then when it exits, it enables these things again, and once again just checks to make sure we have everything required for the AI to function. Then this is triggered, or the change in state is triggered here by this green box around the player. So if there's a spider within the green box of the player, it will turn off is asleep and make it is idle instead, and then it will start to move to the stand state or the patrol state. Yeah, and then we can go to the idle behavior, which is the next one. So it has on the start, it has randomly set idle timer, so that it is waiting for a random amount of time, and then it'll set the current idle timer to the start idle timer. Then if its idle timer is finished, it will say that it's now patrolling. Otherwise, it's just going to keep decreasing its idle timer over time. And that's all the sleep state really does. And you can see the max idle time there is 5. And then once its idle timer is done, it will go to the patrol state. Once again, just checks to make sure we can get the things we need. This time, instead of the sprite renderer, we need the pathfinder and the tile map that it can walk on. And if it can't find those, it'll exit out of the script there. It'll get wait time. It'll set its current wait time to start wait time, which is just set in the actual Unity menu, so it's currently 1 second. And then it has time patrolling as well, which is how long it actually stays in the patrol state before going back to the stand state if it can't see any enemies of it. And then it has the move spot, which is the location it's picked to then pathfind to. and get patrol point will then activate afterwards. Yeah, so get workable tile map is the same as get pathfinder and things, just make sure it's not null. If it is, it'll X out of the function. Or it'll try and set it to the one that is currently existing but not registered yet, or not stored yet. And then on update, it will patrol, which is a script down here. So patrol, it will check if it's close enough to its next patrol point. If it is, it will wait at its current point, which is here, so it just uses its wait time, so it moves to its patrol point, then it waits there for however long its wait time is, which I believe I just showed was a second. Yeah, so it waits at that point for a second to kind of mimic looking around, stays there, waits, pretends to look around, then gets the next patrol point and moves again. And it will trigger the corresponding Boolean variables as there as well, just to make sure everything is being set correctly. And then underneath it'll check if it's run out of patrol time. If it has, it'll go back to being in the idle state. Otherwise, it'll keep patrolling and decrease that patrolling time. And then this is where it gets the patrol point, so it just does it with a random tile within its patrol range, which I believe is at the top actually. And it's just set to 5 at the moment, so within 5 tiles of itself is where it can find a patrol point. So they're not set patrol points, they're just random patrol points. Maybe not the most effective way of doing it, might be better to have set patrol points, but as the dungeons themselves would be random, I couldn't think of a specific way to do that other than like coding it into each of the prefab rooms, which I didn't get a chance to do. But that's how it currently works, and then it will do its reset its wait time and stuff like that when it gets to finding a new patrol point, so that it will wait when it gets to that new patrol point again. And then otherwise, if it's seen an enemy which is triggered by being within this red circle of the player, so if the spider gets within this red circle, it will have found the enemy, and then they will go into the chase behavior because it will trigger it will toggle the can see enemy boolean for that spider, and then it will on enter check that it has the pathfinder again. It will get the player's previous position, and then it will pathfind to that position. This same thing, making sure it has the pathfinder, if not exiting out or selecting the current one in the game. And then this on update here is just updating the player's position. So if the player has moved and isn't at the previous position, it'll set that to the current position and then try and pathfind to that new position. This isn't a very good way of doing it, because then it's updating the pathfinding every time. So if you've it's especially bad if you've got multiple spiders, because then they're all going to be sending pathfinding requests to the pathfinding system, and it's going to have to deal with all of those and process all of those before sending each one back to, or it'll process one, send it back, process the next, send it back. But that means that some spiders might just stop for a second because they no longer have the path that they were on because it's being recalculated. So it's probably better to not do it on update and to do it a different way. But this is the way I was currently doing it because I didn't get a chance to improve it. But that is everything for the enemy state machine at the moment. I can try and show you a little example of how it works. If I get these two here, so you can see this spider that was in the green box is now awake and moving around patrolling. This one here is still idle, it seems. But now he's decided to stop patrolling. He's actually gone out of the green box, so he was just in, so if they go out of the green box, they should deactivate again as well. But as you can see, this guy's now stopped, and that guy went out of the box and he's deactivated. Oh no, he's just up. There we go, now he's deactivated. But if I go over here and get closer to this spider, he'll realise that he's seen me and he'll start pathfinding towards me. As you can see, it's a bit juddery because it keeps recalculating paths, and as you can see now here, because there's multiple spiders tracking onto me, it's going a bit funky and they're not it's not going super well and they're not even reaching the right tile to touch me. But that would have been fine, because if they had an actual attack instead of just on collision, they could then do their attack from this range, so it would be fine. So let's kill all of them, the money spawns, and we can collect all of that. Yeah, but that's all. The state system there is functional, just not optimal. The next thing I wanted to show was like the iSubject interfaces and how they are used. So if I open up this here, no, that's the wrong one. We want iSubject. So we've got register observer, remove observer, notify observer, and then the different type of notification types. So if you add something, remove something, or change something, I'll show what that means in a second. So we've got here the potion manager. So it inherits from the iSubject interface for the potion enum type. We've got the list of observers, the list of potions in the inventory, and the potions count for each of the potions in the inventory. So first it's got the singleton pattern to make sure that there's only one of these in the game. If it's not, it will destroy itself. If there's multiple, or if there isn't any, it will make itself, or at least it should do. Excuse me. Then we've got register observers here, so for every observer that tries to, or for every observer that it needs, it will then register them to its observers observers list there. Sorry. Then we've got remove observers if you need to remove them from the list, and notify observers. So we've got using the different notification types, so added, removed, or changed. So added or removed refers or is used in the potions dictionary here. So if a potion type, as you can see with the potion enum and then the game object for the potion, if the potion type is added, it will notify all the observers that need it, or all the observers in the list, that the potion type has been, or a potion's been added of that potion type. If it's removed, it does the same thing, notifies all observers that a potion's been removed of that type, and then the observers can do whatever it is that they want with that. And I can show one of the observers in a second. And then the different one here is item altered, which does relative, or it relates to the potion count dictionary. So it checks how, like, the count, or it finds the potion type that we're looking for and then gives the number remaining of that potion type. And then we can do things like add potion to inventory. It'll check if we've already got that potion type, and then it will add it, if we do, to the potions count rather than to the potions. If we don't have it, then it will add it and set its count to 1, and then add it to the potions as well as the potions count, and then it will notify all the observers that it's been added. It should also here, I've just noticed, do a notification for item altered saying that the potion count's gone up, but it doesn't, so I'll fix that in a second. It does the same kind of thing here if it's trying to remove it, so it checks if we have the potion type. If it doesn't have the potion type, just exit out, because you can't remove a potion you don't have. If it does have the potion type, it'll remove them from the potions count, remove them from the potions dictionary, and then notify the observers that that potion has been removed. Then alter potion count is for the potions count. So firstly checks if we have the potion type in potions count. If we don't, just exit out. Then it checks if you're not increasing the count. So if we're not increasing the count, we must be decreasing the count. So if it then has to check if the potion count is greater than 1. If it is greater than 1, we can decrease it by the number said. Which I've realised may cause issues now. Look, I'm finding a lot of bugs while trying to make this video, but yeah, that should be potion type is greater than num to alter by, not just 1, because if the num to alter by is like 2, for example, and you have, or if the num to alter by is 3 and you have a potion count of 2, then I'll decrease it and it'll be -3. So that wouldn't be good. Or not -3, -1, sorry. You know what I'm trying to say. Equally, if you're trying to decrease it by 2 and you have 2, then it'll go to 0, which wouldn't be good. But yeah, it will decrease the potion count by the number to alter by if it's greater than 1, as I said, should be greater than num to alter by. Otherwise, if it is just 1, it will remove it from the inventory. Yeah, so that should be num to alter by, and then that should be an else, not an else if, because it will just remove it if it's not. Otherwise, if we are increasing the account, it'll just find the potion type and add the number to increase by, and then it'll notify the observers that it's been changed. So I could do a alter potions count thing in here with just 1, and then I wouldn't have to worry about doing this call up here as well, which is probably the more effective way to do it. And then we can do get potion, which returns the actual potion game object from the potions dictionary. We can just, well, it checks that the potion's there. If it's not, it'll do an error message and return nothing. Otherwise, it'll return the potion. Here, it will just check if the potion is there. It won't actually return the potion. So it'll say, is the potion type there? If it is, yes. If it's not, no. It returns true or false. Then that should say potion count, but I copied it from the weapon manager script, so it should say check potion count. Does the same sort of thing, checks the potions in the potion count dictionary. If it is, it will return the count for that potion type. If it's not, it'll return 0 and say it's not been found. And then use potion is the main function, or the core functionality of this script. So it'll get the potion type, check if it's in our potions, if potions count is and then if the potions count for the potion type is less than or equal to 0 by some issue or oversight, like this one up here that I didn't think about, then it'll say potion not found in dictionary. Otherwise, it will then do, it'll get the potion game object to do get its component of iPotion and use the potion effect. And here is the interface for iPotion. It just has potion effect. That's the only thing it does, but it makes it somewhat easier to, or it makes it easier to call the specific function by doing it through this interface method, and then it will decrease the potion count by 1. So I can show you, I thought I had it up, but I have the potion of healing is currently the only potion in the game, so it has the potion effect of getting the player instance, which shouldn't be a player instance, because if I wanted to make this multiplayer game, then it would be like game manager.player thing, but currently, because it's only single player, it's player.instance and it's using a singleton method. Then it gets the health system for that player and does take damage using the potion effect, and it says that it's not a critical hit because we're not doing critical, there's no critical healing in the game. So I can go into the health system in a bit as well. But that is how the potion system and the similar sort of thing happens for the weapon system. So if we go into the health system quickly, because that's also important, we've got all of the variables, and yes, we've got variables for each character, so their max health, their health, whether or not they're unkillable, which I use for the practice dummies, so they can take an infinite amount of damage. We've got the hit die of the character, so for example, if the player was a barbarian, their hit die would be 1d12, and then the number of hit die, which would be based on the character's level, or just if it's a creature, whatever, how many hit die it has. So hit dice it has, sorry. So if you were a level 3 barbarian, you'd have 3d12, so it'd be 3 as the number of hit die, and then 12, or 12 as the hit die, so it's the maximum thing. It'll set the max health to the hit die initially, and then health to max health. And then if it's the player, it'll let the UI controller know that we need to watch this player's max health and health so that we can display it on the UI. And then we have the take damage method here, which is what is called in the potion of healing, which I showed here, take damage. So it takes the damages for the different damage types of the potion, and from here it's potion effect, which is the damages struct. And I think if I go into prefabs here, potion of healing, you can see the damage, the the damage struct list here. So we've got the damage type, which is healing, damage die, number of dice, and the damage modifier. So it's d4, 2 of the d4, so it's 2d4, and then the damage modifier is +4. Yeah, so it'll take all of that information in, and then whether or not it's a crit, which we know it's not, then it'll go to manage damage. If health is greater than max health, it'll set health back to max health because we don't want the player having more health than their maximum. And then it'll update the health on the UI if it is the player that we're looking at here, and it'll then check if player dead, which we can go and see here. It's just going to set it to inactive, which is not what we want to do in the actual game, but it was just for testing purposes. And then if health is less than 0 and it's not unkillable, it'll do enemy.death, because we know it's not the player because we've done that here, so it'll just destroy the enemy, which is a script with an enemy that also just kind of sets them inactive and returns them to the object pool, I believe. But yeah, then after calculate damage, oh, well, actually that was the manage damage script, sorry. So then before that, it'll do calculate damage. So here it will go, it will create a damage indicator from the object pool of damage indicators, which I can show you in a second, and it'll place it in the correct position, etc. And then it'll actually generate the damage amount. So damage amount will be dice roller, which I believe I showed in the first video, but I can show it again quickly. Dice roller, so it'll do health system. It does the dice roller dot roll multiple, so it'll roll multiple dice using the maximum for the dice and the number of dice. So for the health system, it'll do the damage struct dot damage die and the damage struct dot num of dice, which we went over in the health potion. If it's a crit, it'll then add, or it'll do this again by rolling more dice and add that to the damage amount. Otherwise, it'll just add the damage modifier onto the damage amount. So with the healing potion, it'll be 2d4 plus 4. So it'll roll 2d4, so it could get like a 2 and a 3, use 5, then add the damage modifier, it'd be 9 total, and then damage type for this damage struct, or for this, sorry, for the calculation is equal to the damage struct dot damage type, which in the case of the potion of healing is of course healing. And then it'll check resistances and then calculate the total, or it'll set the damage amount to what it should be, taking into account resistances and immunities and vulnerabilities and things. The function is just called check resistances, probably not the most clear name, so I should change that, but yeah, and then it will deal the damage amount to the current character's health, whether that be enemy or player. And so here is the check resistances. It'll first check if the character is immune. If it is, damage is automatically 0, because if it's immune, it's not going to take any damage from that source. If it's not immune, and it will set the damage indicator's color to black, sorry, forgot about that, and it will then set the damage amount there, which probably should just be done at the end, because I've called this same function many, many times, and it's probably a more effective way of doing it. Yeah, I'll think about that later. I could do like this at the bottom and then have a different like temporary color variable up here. Let me just change it quickly for you live in the video. So I could do color equals indicator color, or not equals, what am I doing? Color indicator color equals color dot red by default. And then we can do, if we copy this and do indicator, oh, I can't spell indicator color equals color dot black. the end here, we'll do this just once, and this will be indicator color, so we're not calling the same, or not repeating the script, the same code so many times. And then we can just change this as well. So if it's immune, it'll set the color to black and the damage amount to 0, obviously. Otherwise, if it's not immune, it checks if it's resistant. If it's resistant, it'll half the damage, and it will, not that one, we want to copy this one. And if it's resistant, it'll set the color to grey instead, to indicate that it's resisting the damage. The black will indicate it's immune to the damage. If it's vulnerable, it's instead going to set the color to yellow, and it's going to double the damage amount, because that's what happens in D&D. If you are vulnerable to damage type, you then increase the damage amount by double. If the damage amount, or if the damage type is healing, it's instead going to invert the damage amount, so it's going to make it negative so that it heals instead of actually deals damage, and it's going to set the color to green. And then otherwise it's just going to be red, so this actually isn't needed anymore. Yeah, that one's no longer needed. And then if it's a crit, it's going to make the indicator color yellow, which is the same as vulnerability, so it could be quite confusing, and I have considered changing it. I just haven't got around to it yet and don't know what color I would make it, because yellow is just in my brain what a critical hit should be, and also what a vulnerability should be, but I don't. Yeah, I'll change that at another point. So if we save this, this should still function the same way, and I can show that in a second. So we've got here, we have this barrel here is actually resistant to piercing damage, which is the type of damage done by the dagger that I'm using here. So if I make this a bit bigger, so we can see, look, it's just doing 1s in grey, 2s in grey. If it does happen to get a crit, it should come up in yellow. There we go, I've got a 3 in yellow. So the dagger's doing 1d4 damage. The maximum damage it can do, because it's resistant, is actually 4, because if you get a crit, it'll double it. So if you get 2, it'll then double it to 4, but not actually. So yeah, and as you can see, because it's resistant, it's even doing 0 damage sometimes. But if I take this, some reason I can no longer move. So don't know why that happened. So if I pick up this potion of healing here, if it will let me. There we go. And I use that, you'll see it did the healing there. And that's a slight oversight I've just seen. But yeah, it will then come up as green if it's healing instead. And it's now saying minus because it's trying to do, or it's displaying minus. So that one might actually have to be slightly different instead. There we go, this should now function as intended. Grab that, do here. That came up as -6. Ah, because that's still at the bottom there. Yeah. It's an issue with coding in the video. No, not that far back. How do I do this? I'll come back to that later. I've had deja vu of this moment. But yeah, I'll come back and fix that later, but you understand what I'm trying to do there with that. Yeah, I also wanted to show like the weapon system. So we've got base weapon here, which is what all weapons inherit from, and it's got like the weapon name, the weapons data pack for like the damage it does, damage types, etc., whether or not it's a crit, the enemy layer box for that weapon, and then the damage box for that weapon. So if I go into here and go to the dagger, this inherits from the base weapon, and then we've got also the projectile or the projectile data pack, because the dagger is a thrown weapon as well. It has the attack function, so it first checks that we do actually have that weapon in the player's inventory, and then as long as it is there, it'll set the weapon object to weapon object that is passed in through the attack method, and then set whether or not it's critical, which is determined in the player, and I will show that in a second. Then because it's a thrown weapon, it has two different attack types, so we'll check which button on the mouse is pressed. If it's mouse button 1, it'll be 0. If it's mouse button 2, it'll be 1. And if it's 0, it'll do melee attack, and then or ranged attack. Ranged attack spawns projectile. Projectile gets all the data from the dagger projectile data pack, and then it will lower the weapon count and also make a game object, or it will do it will spawn a projectile from the ranged object pooler, which I showed in the first video and it will name it edited projectile and give it all the data there. And then it will alter weapon count. It will decrease it by 1. Otherwise, if it's a melee attack, it'll check if there's enemies in the overlap box for the weapon, the dagger. If there are, or if there is at least one enemy. No, not if there is at least one. If there is an enemy, because it only attacks one enemy at a time, it will then deal damage based on the dagger's damage to that enemy, which I can show if we go back into the game here. Oh, I missed. But there, deals damage to the spiders because they are in its overlap box. And if I go to the scene here, we should be able to see. Have to do it like this. So in here, you should be able to see, yeah, there's the dagger's damage box. As you can see, it's a bit bigger than probably what it should be, but the dagger does a little animation and it goes to the edge of the dagger's attack animation there. And it also has this blue indicator for where the dagger can be thrown as well, and like the accuracy of that. But yeah, that's how the weapons work there. And then if I go to player quickly, to references, it's in weapon holder, and then weapon holder's attack should have a reference in player. So go here, attack roll, it checks if it's a critical, which will be false by default. Then it will do a dice roll if the d20 is greater than its crit min roll, which I think is just 20 at the moment, and like there might be other ways to affect that later in the game, but at the moment it's just base 20, so if you get a 20 it's crit. Then it'll say crit is true. It'll do the attack type, which is the button you pressed, and then it will say whether or not it's critical, and it will send that to player weapon, which will then send it to the main weapon. And these are like, this is the check here in the input system to check which button's been pressed and whether or not you can attack based on the time between attacks. But yeah, I believe that is everything I wanted to show today. If I think of anything else that I've forgotten, I will come back and show that another time, but that is the main functionality of the game. Yeah, I'm not going to go into the actual like dungeon generation in this video because it's too long and complicated, but if people request it, I can go into that in a separate video. But yeah, that is all from me today. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in whatever the next video is. Goodbye.